Fellowship Farm. Book 14, Flying Fitzgeralds. In the 14th book of the Fellowship Farm series, Olingah has a close encounter with 1,000,000 maggots. Leezah receives an exciting letter but struggles to be generous in prosperity. As a result of the letter, the family has the opportunity to go on a journey. The journey takes them to a place of unlimited sweets, where Olingah and Skye-Maree learn some important truths from the strawberries dipped in chocolate, pavlova, cake, ice cream and doughnuts. Chapter 1, Munching Maggots. The winter rain fell from the night sky on the farmhouse as the Fitzgeralds of Fellowship Farm prepared for the first day of Term 3. Leezah was 11 and was in Year 6. Her 9-year-old sister Skye-Maree was in Year 4. Their 7-year-old brother Olingah was in Year 2. They all went to Kellyton Primary School. It had been a very cold and wet July holidays, and the children were looking forward to returning to school. They spent the evening making sure their uniforms, books and bags were ready for school. Rommy was making sandwiches for their lunches when she noticed that Olingah's lunchbox was missing. "Where is it, Ollie?"
"I don't know, Mummy."
"Check your bag in the boot room," suggested Rommy. Olingah went out onto the veranda and into the boot room. He turned on the light. Leezah's bag and Skye's bag were hanging on the bag hooks by the door. Olingah's bag was in the back corner of the boot room, where he had thrown it in his excitement about holidays, at the end of the last day of Term 2. He went over to it and picked it up. He noticed a lot of movement when he picked up the bag. Suddenly, he realized the movement came from thousands of ants and hundreds of maggots. They were crawling and wriggling in his bag, on his bag, and on the floor around his bag. There was a very strong, bad smell. "Yuck!" Olingah shouted and dropped his bag. He hurried back to the kitchen.
"Mom, I found my lunchbox."
"Well done. May I please have it?"
Nope. It's full of ants and maggots and it stinks."
Rommy handed Olingah a scrubbing cloth and the bottle of washing up liquid. "Here you are, my love. Go and clean your box, your bag, and the floor of the boot room, please."
"Oh no, Mum, it stinks. I can't touch it, Mum,"
cried Olingah. "Who is going to clean it then, Ollie?" Rommy asked, smiling lovingly at him.
"Oh, Mum, can't you? Please, Mum."
Rommy handed Olingah some rubber gloves. "You can wear these if you like." Olingah took the gloves, cloth and detergent. He went back to the boot room and put on his boots. He felt sick at the smell and sight of all the maggots.
"This is disgusting,"
he said aloud to himself. He slipped on the rubber gloves. They were way too big for his little hands, but it was better than touching maggots. Olingah lifted the bag, with ants and maggots dropping off it along the floor. He carried it along the veranda to the outside sink. He dropped it in the sink. Scores of little white wrigglers fell off the bag and into the sink. They immediately started to wriggle their way to the edges of the sink.
"This is disgusting,"
Olingah said again as the smell of rotting food and maggots wafted up his nostrils. A few tears sprung from his eyes. He turned on the tap and water and started to wash the creepy crawlies down the sink. Olingah turned his bag slowly round and round, letting the water run down the sides. Then he opened the zipper as much as he could. He pulled the sides of the bag down. Inside the bag was a lunchbox. Inside the half-open lunchbox was the last of a rotten apple core and leftover cheese sandwich, barely recognizable through the wriggling, crawling cover of black and white. Olingah tried not to breathe in as he pulled the box out of the bag and emptied the contents onto the lawn. He then dropped the box under the tap. It took a long time to rinse the bag and box completely clean. Olingah dumped the wet bag on the veranda, hoping it would dry somehow. He then used the scrubber and the detergent to thoroughly clean his lunchbox. When he had washed and rinsed his lunchbox, he dropped his boots to the boot room and went back into the kitchen. Rommy had his lunch on the table ready to put in the box. She smiled as he came in. "How is it?" she asked.
Disgusting,
frowned Olingah.
I feel sick in my stomach.
Well done for cleaning your lunchbox and bag, Ollie.
It doesn't feel well done,
said Olingah crossly.
It feels disgusting.
Rommy continued to smile at Olingah as she dried the box with a tea towel. It sounds like you didn't enjoy cleaning maggots out of your bag and lunchbox, Ollie. Olingah looked at Rommy with a frown, but he didn't have anything more to say. Please go and get ready for bed now, Rommy said. We'll have evening prayers in 10 minutes. After prayers, Flip took himself off to bed. Leezah and Skye-Maree read by the fire, and Rommy settled Olingah in bed. As he burrowed under his doona like a little wombat, he said to his mother,
Don't you love me as much as you did when I was 6?
Rommy was surprised by the question. Of course I love you just as much as when you were 6, my darling, she replied. And I will love you when you are 8, 9, 10, 20, 35, 61, 111.
Mummy, even I won't be alive when I'm 111, and neither will you.
I will always love you, Ollie, just the same as I have always loved you. Why do you ask?
Because when I was 6 and I left my lunchbox in my bag over the holidays and the cockroaches got into it, you cleaned it for me. But now I'm 7, you made me do it. And it was revolting. So if you loved me the same as before, you would have cleaned my lunchbox for me. But you didn't.
Rommy gave Olingah a big kiss and hug. Then she answered him. Abdu'l-Baha says that mummies and daddies should accustom their children to hardship. If we make everything easy for you, you don't learn responsibility. It feels easier to have someone clean your smelly bag. But if we keep doing that, you don't learn anything. Do you think you will ever leave your lunchbox in your bag again, Ollie?
No way,
said Olingah. So, you have grown, my love. You have learned to be more responsible. Tomorrow you can put 3 stickers on the virtue chart next to responsibility to celebrate that growth. Olingah closed his eyes and curled up in a ball. He didn't like being accustomed to hardship at all. Rommy kissed him good night. Chapter 2: Fighting, Fairness and Forgiveness. When the children got off the school bus after their first day of term 3, the winter rain was pouring. But Leezah stopped to open the flap on the green mailbox out the front of Fellowship Farm. Leezah had been checking the post every Monday since she sent off the labels from 2 pineapple tins, with the hope of winning a family cruise. The post box was empty. The children waded from the gate to the house and went inside to have their afternoon snacks before going out on the farm to do their chores with their dad. While they ate at the small table in the kitchen, the children heard the sound they had been waiting for. It was the sound of a motorbike engine. It came up the road and stopped outside the farm for a moment. A few seconds later, the children heard the beep-beep of the motorbike horn. The motorbike then turned around and headed back down the wet, potholed road.
"The postman has come!"
cried Leezah, dropping her unfinished sandwich on her plate. She jumped up, rushed through the kitchen door and out to the back veranda. At the other end of the small kitchen table, Olingah struggled to stand. He urgently wanted to go and check the mail too.
"Wait! Wait for me!"
Olingah wailed. But Leezah was already in the boot room, pulling on her raincoat, rain hats and boots. Olingah dropped his sandwich and ran after his sister. The puppies were thrilled to see Leezah and came splashing across the flooded back lawn and up the steps on the back veranda. When they arrived under the shelter, they shook their wet bodies vigorously, sending a spray of wet dog-smelling water all over Leezah.
"Ah, you gooses!"
she laughed and stomped down the path, which was now more like a shallow stream. The land between the front gate of the farmhouse and the front gate of the farm was covered in water. Leezah and the puppies splashed their way through to get to the mailbox. The mail was in a large plastic bag inside the mailbox. Leezah grabbed it and turned to go back to the farmhouse. Olingah was just coming down the path by the side of the house. "Come on, Ollie, let's go!" Leezah shouted over the noise of the rain and the wind as she gently pushed him back the way he had come. The children hung their wet coats, hats and boots to dry in the boot room. The puppies tumbled around on the veranda, while Leezah and Olingah hurried back into the warm house. Leezah took the dripping plastic bag to the dining table in the living room. She dried it down with a tea towel before opening it up and tipping all the mail onto the table. There were bills and other official-looking letters, all addressed to Flip or Rommy. There was a letter from Kellyton Primary School and a postcard for Rommy. But there didn't seem to be anything from the Sunshine Australia Fruit Company. There was nothing addressed to Leezah. Leezah and Olingah were disappointed. They stacked the other mail neatly at the end of the table and hung the plastic bag to dry above the kitchen sink. As they stacked the mail, Leezah noticed an official-looking envelope addressed to Ms. E. Fitzgerald. "Wait!" cried Leezah. "That's me! E. Fitzgerald, Ms. Elizabeth Fitzgerald." Leezah tore open the envelope while her siblings watched with bated breath. There was a piece of paper inside. At the top of the page, there was a golden pineapple and the words Sunshine Australia Fruit Company, Pty Ltd. Leezah started to read the letter, then suddenly yelled, "Yippee!" Skye-Maree and Olingah started bouncing on the spot. "What?" they asked. "What does it say?" Leezah started to dance. "We are going on a..." Leezah stopped dancing and grinned. "A what, Leezah? A what?" cried Olingah. "A cruise!" Leezah finished. She passed the letter to her siblings. It was way too difficult for Olingah. And Skye also struggled to understand the official text of the letter, but they could see the big gold letters saying, "Congratulations!" Just then, there was a honk out the front of the farmhouse. Flip had come to get the children for their afternoon chores. "Oh no, we haven't even changed yet!" The children spoke to Flip on the radio to let him know they would be out in 2 minutes. Then they rushed off to the bedroom to change into their farm clothes. Everyone was racing to put their clothes on, partly because they didn't want to keep Flip waiting, and partly because each one wanted to be the one who told Flip the news about the cruise.
"I want to tell Daddy,"
said Olingah, pulling on his pants so quickly that he didn't notice at first that they were back to front.
No, I want to,
said Leezah, rushing to turn the sleeves of her jumper in the right way so she could pull it on.
No,
said Olingah.
Let me. But I was the one who entered the competition, Ollie. That's not fair.
Olingah pulled his socks on and ran through the bedroom door.
Don't you dare!
Leezah yelled after him. She chased him and grabbed his arm, yanking it back so Olingah couldn't run off to put his boots on. Olingah cried out in pain and fell onto the floor. Leezah rushed past him, through the kitchen and out to the boot room. She pulled on her boots and hat and ran down the side of the farmhouse to the white ute. She pulled open the door of the ute and said,
"Guess what, Daddy?"
Before Flip even had a chance to guess, Leezah continued, "We won the cruise!" Flip raised his eyebrows and wiggled his ears. He raised his hand to high-five his daughter. Leezah climbed into the ute. Just as she shut the door, she saw Olingah coming slowly down the path in the rain with Skye's arm around his shoulder. It was clear from the look on his face that he was crying, though the tears streaming down his face mingled with the rain. He was clutching the arm that Leezah had yanked. Skye-Maree opened the back door of the ute and helped her brother in. His shoulder was very sore, so Skye helped him with his seatbelt. Leezah sat very still and quiet on the front seat, looking straight ahead. "What happened to my boy?" asked Flip, unclipping his seatbelt and turning to face the back seat.
"Leezah broke my arm,"
sniffled Olingah. Flip looked at Leezah. His eyebrows were raised again, but this time his ears were not wiggling. Leezah ignored his stare and looked straight out of the front window, which was starting to fog up from their breath. Flip turned his attention back to his son. "Where is it broken, Sunshine?" he asked.
"In my shoulder,"
sniffled Olingah as the tears dried up. "Do you think you should give the chores a miss today, Ollie?" asked Flip. Olingah nodded. "Perhaps you had better stay and take care of him, Skye-Maree," Flip continued. "Perhaps Leezah can work alone today." Leezah continued to look straight ahead in silence as Skye-Maree and Olingah climbed back out of the car and walked slowly back to the farmhouse. Flip started the engine and drove up toward the hay barn. As they drove along, Flip was also silent. The only sound was the windscreen wipers swishing back and forth. There was a big hole, which was usually filled with Flip's questions about the day at school and with funny jokes. As they drove in silence and pushed the hay onto the ute in silence and attended to all the chores in silence, Leezah thought. She thought about winning the cruise. She thought about scrambling into her clothes so she could be the first one to tell Flip. She thought about Olingah yelling that he wanted to be the one to tell Flip. She thought again that it was only fair that she should tell her dad, as she was the one who entered the competition. She thought Olingah was very, very annoying. She thought he wasn't fair. She thought he always wants his own way. These thoughts went around and around in Leezah's head. But as time passed and the chores continued in silence, Leezah could not help thinking about what she had done to her brother. She remembered how she had grabbed his little arm in her strong hand. She remembered how she had pulled it hard and yanked him to the ground. She thought about how she had left her brother on the floor and run off. She thought about the pain he was in and the tears streaming down his face. She thought about how she had not said sorry when he got in the car. Tears started to roll down her face. Leezah started to wonder if being the one to tell Flip about the cruise was worth the suffering she had caused her brother. She started to wonder whether she could have done it differently. When the chores were almost finished, Flip parked the ute and they walked in silence past the hen house, collected the eggs, and continued home. The rain was easing and the tears had dried on Leezah's cheeks. She had an idea of what she could have done. She thought it was fair that she wanted to be the one to tell Flip about the cruise. But if Olingah didn't respect that, she should not have grabbed his arm. She thought it would have been better to let him get to Flip first. And then they could have discussed it as a family later. Maybe through consultation, Olingah would have seen that what he had done wasn't fair, and he would have made a different choice next time. Just as they went through the gate, Flip put his arm around Leezah and gave her a big hug. He kissed the top of her head, and then they went inside. Chapter 3: Rudy Nudy Risk. When Flip and Leezah entered the kitchen, they noticed that the faces of Rommy, Skye-Maree, and Olingah were rather glum. The letter from the fruit company was open on the kitchen table. Leezah felt ashamed. She walked over to her brother and wrapped him in her arms, taking care not to press his right shoulder.
I'm very sorry, Ollie. I shouldn't have hurt you. It was unkind of me. That's okay, Leezah,
said Olingah. Thank you for your humility, Leezah, and your forgiveness, Ollie. You may both put stickers on the virtues chart. But I'm afraid we have some disappointing news, Leezah. Leezah turned to look at her mother. The letter doesn't say we won a cruise, darling. Leezah's face fell.
Oh, what does it say?
It says that in the competition for the cruise, we won a secondary prize.
What's a secondary prize? What did we win?
Asked Leezah. We won a year's supply of tinned pineapple.
Oh no, moaned Flip. I think I've just gone right off pineapple.
Rommy picked up the letter and glanced at it again. However, apart from all that pineapple, there is something that you will be happy about. The prizes are presented in Sydney, and the company will fly our family to Sydney for the award ceremony.
So we get to go to Sydney?
Grinned Leezah. Yes. So long as we agree to have our photo in the paper holding the certificate from the fruit company.
I agree,
said Leezah.
I agree,
said Skye-Maree.
I agree,
said Olingah. Well, in 2 weeks' time, we will go to Sydney. We had better check that you three have some respectable clothes to wear. It will be warmer up there than in Kellyton. 2 weeks later on Friday, Flip picked the children up from school at lunchtime. He parked the car across the road from the school. Together, they walked across the road and down the street toward the op shop. As usual, Sue was inside. Whenever she wasn't busy hanging new donations, she worked on her quilts, which she made by hand. Her mouth was full of pins when the family came in. She waved hello and took the pins from her mouth, sticking them carefully into her echidna-shaped pincushion. Hello, Fitzgerald 4, she smiled. What can I do for you today?
We're going to Sydney,
said Olingah, jumping on the spot.
We need to get some respectable clothes because it's warmer in Sydney and we've grown,
he explained. Sue's face folded into wrinkles of concern. Ooh, she said. I haven't got much spring stock. It's been so cold. People are still buying winter gear. It was true. The children looked around the shop. There were only a few pairs of shorts, which looked like they were for very large ladies.
Sorry,
Sue apologized.
that's okay, Sue,
said Flip with a serious face.
The children can just run around Sydney, Rudy, Nudy.
Sue looked shocked, and Leezah started to giggle. After the family left the shop, they drove back to the farm. They radioed Rommy to let her know that they had not found anything at the op shop and were on their way home. When they got home, Rommy was serving bowls of pasta with pesto and cheese on top. They would be travelling that evening, so Rommy wanted to make sure they had a good hot meal for lunch. After lunch, Rommy and Flip asked the children to rummage through the plastic boxes at the bottom of their wardrobe. The boxes held their cooler clothes. They had not worn them for months. They pulled out their lighter pants and shirts. But the children had been busy growing over the past 6 months, and nearly everything was too small. Skye-Maree tried on a shirt that had been her favourite last spring. It was so small that she got stuck in it. Leezah and Olingah had to yank it over her head to get it off.
I guess that shirt is now yours, Ollie,
she said, passing it to him. The children took their toothbrushes and hairbrushes from the bathroom. A couple of books each, a prayer book, pyjamas, and some underwear. They dropped them into the empty suitcase that Rommy and Flip had laid out in the living room. "Is that all?" asked Rommy.
Yep,
said Leezah, as Olingah dropped some of the shirts his sister had handed down to him into the case.
Nothing fits us anymore.
There's a problem here, said Flip.
Yes,
agreed Rommy. And I have the solution, continued Flip.
Great, exclaimed Rommy, looking hopeful.
The problem is our children keep growing. The solution is we have to stop feeding them.
Rommy stopped looking hopeful. Flip continued,
If we reduce their rations to 1 meal per week, we will not have to buy clothes every year.
True story, Sherlock, said Rommy. But let's explore other options first. Rommy went into the kitchen, picked up the phone and pressed the buttons. After a short pause, the children heard her say, Hi, Anissa, it's Auntie Rommy here. Yes, we will see you tonight. Yes, we are very excited about it too. Thank you, darling. Yes, lovely. Yes, could I please talk with Mummy or Daddy? Thank you. There was a brief pause, then, Jen, hi, yes, we're just packing now. I know. We left it to the last minute. We thought it would be quick and easy, but we have just realised that the children have literally no suitable clothes. Nothing fits. And the op shop is still selling heavy winter clothes as it's still freezing down here. There was a pause. Then, bless you, Jen, thank you. See you tonight. Bye. Rommy looked relieved. Okay, problem solved. Children can keep eating, she said, glancing at Flip.
Phew, said Flip.
Jen is going to take us to the shopping centre in Chatswood tomorrow before we go to the award ceremony. We will pick up some presentable clothes. The children looked at each other with big grins. They couldn't remember ever going to a shopping centre before, and they very rarely bought new clothes. Tomorrow sounded like a fun adventure. Rommy and Flip packed their own clothes. Flip and the children made some sandwiches, a thermos of hot chocolate, and packed some fruit and muesli bars. Just as they finished, the children heard a sound that filled their hearts with joy. It was the sound of Ruha's van pulling into the farm. The children rushed outside and yanked on their gumboots. They ran down the side of the house to where Ruha was just pulling a zip-up bag of belongings from the back seat. She was nearly knocked off her feet with the loving hugs of Olingah, Skye, and Leezah. Ruha was going to stay at Fellowship Farm for the weekend. She would earn some pocket money taking care of the domestic animals and keeping an eye on the farm. "Hello, my gorgeouses," she cried, her brown eyes sparkling with love. As if in the embrace of an octopus, Ruha walked slowly up the side of the house. She had already had a tour of the farm and practiced feeding all the animals. The children showed her to the spare room where Ruha would sleep. Rommy gave her the key to the white ute and the house. When Ruha was settled, the family took their almost empty case to the orange ute. The children gave the puppies one last goodbye cuddle. Then it was Ruha's turn. After squeezing Ruha like a toothpaste tube, it was time to pile into the ute. Ruha waved the family goodbye, grinning from ear to ear. She shut the farm gate behind them, and the Fitzgerald family headed down the dirt road to Kellyton. Chapter 4: Fear, Faith and Flashy Frosting. As they drove the 2 hours to Launceston, Skye focused on the clouds far off in the sky so as to avoid car sickness. Leezah read a book. Olingah, seated in the middle of the back seat, was focused on the road and the dashboard. He would note the speed limit signs and then check what speed the ute was travelling. He kept checking the fuel gauge to see if petrol was low. He squeezed his eyes shut when a car passed them on either side of the road. Glancing at him in the rearview mirror, Flip noticed that Olingah seemed anxious. "How are you feeling, son?" asked Flip.
"Fine,"
said Olingah. Just then a car passed them on the opposite side of the road. Olingah closed his eyes tightly.
"Why are you closing your eyes, Ollie?"
Flip asked. Olingah was quiet for a minute. He was thinking about the question. At first, he wasn't really sure why he was closing his eyes.
"I don't want anything bad to happen,"
he said eventually. "Why do you think something bad might happen?" asked Rommy.
"Well, when we went to Launceston to pick up Anissa and Nick, we got a smashed window and a flat tyre. Then, when we went skiing, we saw a wallaby get hit by a car. I'm just worried something bad will happen this time too."
"Nothing bad will happen, Ollie," said Leezah. "Well, we don't know what might happen," replied Rommy thoughtfully. "Lots of things could happen, and something could happen that is very challenging or scary. But we don't need to worry about them because we have faith."
"Faith that Baha'i won't let bad things happen?"
asked Olingah. "No, faith that Baha'i will always give us the strength to deal with anything that comes along," Rommy clarified.
"We need to make good choices, Ollie," said Flip. "So we make sure the car's engine is taken care of. We fill it with petrol. We put good tyres on the car. We obey the speed zones. We concentrate when we drive. We don't drive when we are tired or sick. But then we can relax. We can trust that whatever comes our way, God will give us the strength to manage it."
"Okay,"
said Olingah. "And if we lose confidence sometimes, it's a good time to pray," added Rommy. "Okay," said Olingah again. He wasn't sure he felt confident that he could manage if something bad happened. He decided to say some prayers quietly to himself. He sat back against the seat and closed his eyes. Inside his head, Olingah sang, "Oh God, refresh and glad in my spirit,
Purify my heart, illumine my powers.
As he sang the prayer over and over in his head, he started to feel relaxed. Eventually, Olingah became so relaxed that he fell fast asleep. The sun was setting when the Fitzgerald family pulled up at the long-term car park of the Launceston Airport. Leezah woke Olingah and everyone climbed out of the ute. Skye pulled the suitcase. Flip carried the carry bag with the food and thermos. They followed the path from the car park to the terminal. Big, colourful feet were painted all along the path between the car park and the terminal. Olingah jumped from painted foot to painted foot all the way along. As they arrived at the terminal, the glass doors slid open. The family stepped gratefully out of the cold, wintry air into the warmth of the heated building. They joined the line of travellers at the Greenways air counter. The children watched as each customer put their case on the conveyor belt for weighing. The suitcase was then trundled away on the conveyor belt and went through a curtained hole. Olingah wondered where the bags went. When it was their turn, they put the case on the scale next to the counter. "Goodness, you travel lightly," smiled the air hostess. Her hair was pulled back tightly from her face into a neat bun, and she had very red lips. "This suitcase only weighs 4 kilograms. "We wanted to leave plenty of space in case we needed to pack one of the children away," said Flip with a serious face. "I see," said the hostess, continuing to smile with her very red lips. She passed 5 pieces of cardboard to Rommy. "These are your boarding passes, Dr. Fitzgerald. You will be boarding through Gate 2 at 7 p.m. Rommy took the boarding passes and smiled thank you. The children were yearning to go and explore the little airport. They had been there many times before to welcome or farewell friends and relatives. It was really just one very large room. There were no escalators or hallways to explore, and not many shops. But it was always fun to see the displays of the old planes, wander around the book and gift shop, look at the pastries and sandwiches for sale in the cafe, and run up and down the tiled floor of the terminal building.
"Can we explore?"
asked Skye-Maree. Flip nodded. "You may. We'll be in the gate lounge. Come and join us when you're hungry. And remember, we will be boarding in an hour, so don't get lost or we'll have to leave without you." The children ran off. There were all the usual things to see in the airport, but there was also something new. Next to the cafe was a glass display case full of doughnuts. The children counted them all. There were 66 different types. They read the name labels and had a long discussion about which one they would eat if they could have one each. There were chocolate, strawberry, lemon-flavoured doughnuts, doughnuts with cream, custard, icing sugar, mini doughnuts and mega doughnuts, doughnuts with coloured sprinkles and doughnuts with blueberries, doughnuts of every colour and flavour. After looking at them and talking about them for a long time, the children realised they were hungry. Through the glass wall, they could see Rommy and Flip in the gate lounge. They were sitting near the front window, eating sandwiches and drinking hot chocolate. The whole front wall of the terminal was one big window. During the day, people waiting for planes could see the tarmac and watch the planes landing and taking off. The children went through the security arch and joined their parents in the gate lounge.
"I'm starving,"
announced Skye-Maree. "You've come to the right place then," said Rommy, and offered each of them a sandwich. The children each ate 2 sandwiches, a pear, a muesli bar and a cup of hot chocolate. While they ate, they described the doughnuts they had seen.
Can we please buy one?
Asked Olingah.
They are only $4 each.
But why would we pay someone $4 to poison you when we can poison you ourselves for free? Asked Flip.
Dad,
Moaned Olingah.
it's not poison, it's food. Yummy food.
You know what? Said Rommy. I have a feeling there will be plenty of yummy poisonous food at the award ceremony, and you may be allowed to eat some of it. So let's go wash our hands and brush our teeth and get ready to board the airplane. Just then, they heard an announcement.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the boarding call for passengers carrying valid boarding passes for Greenway's Air Flight GA959 to Sydney. This flight will be boarding through Gate 2. We will be boarding the aircraft through the front and rear stairs this evening. Please ensure your mobile phones are switched to airplane mode before crossing the tarmac. Thank you.
That's our flight! That's our flight! Said Leezah excitedly. Rommy nodded and gave each of the children a boarding pass. Flip packed the empty lunchboxes and thermos into the carry bag. The Fitzgerald family lined up behind the other passengers. The air steward checked each boarding pass with a scanner, similar to the one the librarian used at Kellyton Library. Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald, she said to Olingah as she scanned his pass. Olingah grinned. This was followed by, Thank you, Ms. Fitzgerald. Thank you, Miss Fitzgerald. Thank you, Dr. Fitzgerald. Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald, as each of them had their pass scanned. They walked down the cement steps, where Olingah had torn his feast clothes on a previous visit to the airport, and out through a door onto the tarmac. The tarmac was lit by powerful lights that made it bright as day. There were people wearing bright orange vests, loading suitcases onto the plane and driving around on buggies. When the children looked up at the window of the plane, they could see the pilots getting ready. Just as Leezah looked up at the pilots, one of them looked out and saw Leezah.
Look,
said Leezah, waving.
See the pilot in the cockpit? She's waving to us.
They climbed the metal stairs and went inside the plane. Once again, they showed their boarding passes to an air steward. Olingah was disappointed that the second air steward didn't call him Mr. Fitzgerald. The aisle between the rows of seats was narrow, and there were lots of people standing in it. Some were putting their hand luggage in the overhead lockers. Some were trying to squeeze between the seat and another passenger to get to their own seat. Some were helping children settle. But eventually, the aisle cleared, and the family made their way to row 9. There were 3 seats on either side of the aisle. Olingah, Skye-Maree and Leezah sat on one side, while Rommy and Flip sat on the other side. When everyone was seated, the air stewards demonstrated the safety features of the aircraft. Olingah paid very close attention. He hoped the plane wouldn't crash. At the same time, sliding down a big yellow slide from the emergency exit sounded quite fun. He liked the idea of having a life vest with a whistle and a light. And just like the air steward told them to, he counted the number of rows between row 9 and the nearest exit. The nearest exit was at row 13, 4 rows away. Soon the plane was ready for takeoff. It rolled slowly forward and turned away from the terminal. Then it turned slowly left. Soon it was going as fast as a car, then faster than a car. It got faster and faster and faster. The children were pushed back against their seats. Then suddenly, the plane lifted off the ground. It quickly rose up into the sky. Outside the window, the children could see the lights along the side of the highway, and then the lights of Launceston. everything was getting smaller and smaller as the plane flew higher and higher. When the plane landed at Sydney Airport, it was 2 hours past Olingah's bedtime. With the excitement of the journey, he had stayed awake, but he was very tired. It was even past Leezah and Skye-Maree's usual bedtime, and they were also feeling weary. When the plane came to a complete stop, the children unbuckled their seatbelts. The passengers waited patiently by their seats and in the aisles until the air stewards unlocked the doors. Then the passengers started to file out. Instead of going downstairs onto the tarmac, the children found themselves in a carpeted tunnel. As they came out of the tunnel and into the gate lounge, they were attacked. Chapter 5: Shocks and Temptations. Their cousins, Anissa and Nick, along with their Auntie Jen and Uncle Karim, wrapped Leezah, Skye and Olingah in tight hugs and squeezes and covered them with kisses. Rommy and Flip were also squeezed and kissed. Tears flowed and the air was full of Allah Pa. Welcome. How was your flight? Look how big you are. Are you exhausted? Let's get your baggage. All tiredness was forgotten. Nick was now 12 years old, and Anissa was the same age as Olingah, 7. The children chatted and laughed as they walked and ran along the wide corridors of the huge airport. As it was getting late, the airport was not overly crowded. Leaving the adults to walk more slowly behind, the children ran ahead to play on the travelators. When no one else was using them, the children ran the wrong way, against the flow of the travelator, to see if they could run faster than it. They all could. They walked down a long set of steps and through some special folding doors. Then they looked for the baggage carousel with GA959 on the screen above it. Nick found it first, and they went to wait right near the curtain where the bags came out. Olingah was very curious to know what was going on behind that curtain. Soon the suitcases started coming out, and after a minute, the children spotted the almost empty Fitzgerald suitcase. Rommy had tied bright red ribbons to the handle, so it would be easy to distinguish from all the other dark blue suitcases. Nick grabbed the suitcase. He nearly fell over backwards because it was so light and he had been expecting it to be heavy. The two families continued their animated conversations all the way to the cars. Auntie Jen and Uncle Karim had brought both their cars so that they could fit everyone in. Olingah, Anissa, Rommy and Aunt Jen went in one car. Skye-Maree, Leezah, Nick, Flip and Uncle Karim went in the other car. The roads were wide and busy, with many lanes of traffic. Olingah wondered how his aunt knew where to go. The city was lit up with millions of lights, and even at such a late hour, there were people and cars everywhere. Normally, Jen and Karim travelled from the airport to their home by going through a big tunnel under the harbour. But for the sake of their special guests, they went over the Sydney Harbour Bridge. The children looked out the window to see the Opera House all lit up. There were boats covered in lights on the harbour. It looked magical. After about 40 minutes of driving, the Fitzgeralds arrived at the home of their cousins. The children piled out of the cars and rushed inside. The house was 2 stories high. It had carpet and rugs everywhere, and lots of very beautiful furniture. But there was no time to admire that. Nick and Anissa led the way up the carpeted staircase, bounding up the steps. They took Leezah and Skye into Anissa's room, which had 2 extra beds made up. Then they took Olingah to Nick's room. Nick's room had a double bed and a mattress made up on the floor.
You can sleep with me, Ollie, if you want to. Or you can sleep on the mattress on the floor.
Olingah flopped onto the mattress on the floor. As soon as Olingah lay down, he felt suddenly and completely exhausted. 1 minute later, when Rommy came upstairs, he was fast asleep. Rommy pulled off his shoes and rolled him under the covers in his clothes. She kissed him good night. The other children also soon settled for bed. They brushed their teeth in a very large bathroom. The walls were covered with mirrors, and the carpeted floor and silver towel rails were heated. Evening prayers were very brief, and as soon as they finished, 4 tired children closed their eyes and fell fast asleep. When the children awoke, the sun was high in the sky and shining brightly. The girls crossed the hall and joined the boys in Nick's room. For Nick and Anissa, the morning air felt cold, and Anissa hurried to pull Nick's doona over her legs. For the Tasmanian cousins, the air felt like summer. Ollie joined everyone on the double bed, and Nick pulled out a bag of Uno cards from a drawer near his bed. There were at least 3 packs of Uno cards combined into one, and the pile was very high. Nick dealt everyone 15 cards, which was almost too many for Anissa and Olingah to manage. Then a very intense game of Uno began. The children were still playing Uno when Uncle Karim came into the room. "Anyone hungry for some breakfast?"
Yes!
The children replied. Nick gathered up the cards and everyone hurried downstairs to the kitchen. The kitchen seemed almost as big as the Fitzgeralds' whole house. In the middle of the kitchen was a large wooden island with cupboards underneath and stools along one side of it. There were large windows in 3 walls as well as the roof, so it was full of sunlight. And everything was made of wood. There were pot plants in all the corners and everything looked new and very clean. There was already bacon, sausages, eggs and tomato frying, as well as toast under the grill. Flip and Karim were chopping fruit from a large bowl on the island. When everyone was ready, the family gathered around the island on the high stools. Auntie Jen handed out plates to everyone. The cooked food was served on large platters in the middle of the island. There were also boxes of cereal and various kinds of milk. "Can I serve you some bacon?" Auntie Jen asked Leezah.
No, thank you, Auntie Jen. I would like some eggs and toast, please,
Leezah replied. Then Auntie Jen offered the same to Skye-Maree, but received the same reply. "Olingah, you love bacon and sausages," she turned to her nephew. "How much would you like?" But she received the same reply. "What's going on?" asked Auntie Jen, offering bacon and sausages and eggs to the rest of the family.
"We are vegetarian now, Auntie Jen,"
explained Olingah. Auntie Jen's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, since when?" Auntie Jen was very surprised.
"Since we realized that eating meat means killing animals? It was a few weeks ago, wasn't it, Mummy?"
"Oh, well, are you sure I can't tempt you?" The aroma of bacon was actually very difficult to resist. It smelt delicious. Olingah could imagine the salty taste of the bacon on his tongue. He remembered how much he loved chomping down on the crunchy crackling. But Olingah shook his head. He ate lots of eggs, toast, fruit, and cereal instead. After breakfast, the 9 family members washed their hands and gathered in the sunroom. It was another large room, full of couches, chairs, and cushions. There was a table in the middle, onto which Uncle Karim placed several prayer books. The Fitzgeralds wished they had their guitar. The family read and sang prayers a cappella for a while. Rommy sang a special teaching prayer for their journey. When they finished, Uncle Karim put the books away in a special cupboard. The children scurried upstairs to get dressed, brush teeth, make beds. Chapter 6: Getting Gorgeous. It was a short walk from Auntie Jen's house to the train station. At the station, the family walked down a long flight of stairs to the platform. Nick and Anissa showed Ollie, Leezah and Skye where to wait. They were going toward the city, so they had to wait on platform 2. Along the platform were benches on which to sit and big glass cases with rows of chocolate bars, chips and drinks inside. There were lots of people everywhere. Hanging down from the roof was a television screen. It said the next train would be there in 1 minute. Skye-Maree started to count.
1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi.
Just as she got to 56 Mississippi, she saw the train coming around the bend. There was a honk of a horn, a squeaking of brakes, and a rush of air as the train passed the station and drew to a stop. The sliding doors of the train opened. Auntie Jen led everyone inside. Olingah noticed that the gap between the train and the platform was just the right size for him to fall down. He stepped carefully over it. Auntie Jen led them up a small flight of stairs to the second story of the train. On the second story, there were rows of blue seats, all facing the same direction. Nick grabbed a handle on top of one of the seats and pushed it forward. Suddenly, there were 2 long seats facing each other. The family settled into their seats together. They could see the platform through the big window of the train. The sign said Gordon.
Let's make as many words as we can from Gordon,
suggested Skye.
Good,
said Nick straight away. Nod, said Rommy.
Don, God, door, Ron, rude and nude,
said Olingah, giggling.
You don't spell it like that, Ollie,
said Skye.
Oh,
said Olingah. Drongo, said Flip. Olingah looked shocked that Flip had called him a drongo, and tears sprung to his eyes. Flip saw his look of surprise and explained, "We can make the word drongo out of Gordon, sunshine." Go, said Uncle Karim. It was the last word made from Gordon before the train did go. The train pulled out of the station and gathered speed. From the window, the children could see roads and cars, houses, trees, and people whizzing past. They wanted the train ride to continue and were disappointed when they found out they had to get off only a few minutes later. You will have a longer ride on the train this afternoon when we go to Darling Harbour, said Uncle Karim. As the train slowed and stopped, the people on the train lined up by the sliding doors. As soon as the doors opened, the crowd of passengers flowed out onto the new platform. There were more passengers waiting to get in, as soon as they could. The first place Auntie Jen took them was a flower shop near the train platform. She squatted down so that she was close to the faces of her children, nieces, and nephew. When we shop today, we will need to stay together so no one gets lost. If anyone gets separated and you can't find the rest of us, you need to ask for directions to the train station. Then, at the train station, come to this flower shop. She gave each of them a piece of paper with a phone number on it. You can also ask someone to call this number. It is for my mobile phone. The serious face of Auntie Jen and the plans she was making made Olingah feel worried.
He hoped that no one would get lost. He hoped nothing bad would happen.
When each of them had put the number in their pocket, Auntie Jen stood up.
Then she said, "Now let's go worship at the Church of Consumerism."
The family headed down some wide cement steps and along a busy footpath.
There were shops everywhere, selling medicine, shoes, sushi, art supplies, nail painting, musical instruments, chocolate, more things than they could even have imagined.
There were musicians on the footpath playing music, cars honking, children crying, and the constant, gentle beeping sound of the pedestrian lights. At the corner, the family crossed to the other side of the street and entered into a large building. Inside the building, it seemed quieter, and people moved more slowly. There were lots of shops, and there was music playing. The children could smell perfume, baking bread, coffee, pizza. They walked past a shop selling products made from sheepskin. Leezah ran her hand over a big soft rug that was on a table near the door. It felt a lot softer than the wool of the sheep on the neighbour's farm. Auntie Jen led them to a large, brightly lit shop. For the Fitzgeralds, it seemed like the shop was the same size as the whole of Kellyton. As Jen led them to the clothes section, they passed rows and rows of toys, books, plates, cups, towels, pillows, gardening tools. Then they came to a large area with racks and racks of children's clothes.
"Now," said Auntie Jen with a big grin. "Rommy and Flip, pipe down. This is my treat."
She turned to the children. "I want each of you to choose 2 outfits each. Shirts, trousers, or skirts. Jumpers, cardigans, shoes, underwear, socks, and stockings. Whatever you decide. 2 full sets each. We will be sitting on the benches near the checkout ready to buy them. Just come to see us when you have made your choices. Nick and Anissa will show you where the dressing rooms are."
Thank you, Auntie Jen,
said all 3.
Thank you, Uncle Karim.
They gave their aunt and uncle big hugs. Then Nick and Anissa grabbed their hands. "Come on, let's go," they said. "Stay together," said Rommy, as she was led to the front of the shop by her sister. The children had never seen such an assortment of clothes in all shapes, colours, and sizes. Nick and Anissa helped them choose clothes that fit and looked good. Leezah chose an outfit all in red. Red woolen hat, red blouse, red jumper, red skirt, red stockings, red shoes, and a red scarf. Olingah chose some yellow checkered pants, a red jumper, and a yellow scarf. The outfit made him look just like Rupert Bear from the comic he liked to read. Skye-Maree chose a long, green, velvety dress with a purple cardigan and black shoes. When they had finished choosing their clothes, Nick and Anissa led them to the front of the shop, where the 4 parents were sitting, talking, and, as always, laughing. When Auntie Jen saw them, she leapt up. Well done," she said, looking over their clothes. She took them to the self-serve checkout. Auntie Jen waved each item in front of a small screen that beeped. When all the clothes were in the carry bags that Auntie Jen had brought, she stuck her debit card into the machine and pressed the buttons. Soon the machine spat out a long white piece of paper with numbers on it. Auntie Jen put the receipt into her handbag and passed the carry bags to Nick and Leezah. She dropped all the plastic coat hangers into a big yellow plastic box next to the checkout. The children wrapped their arms around their auntie and showed their gratitude through a long, tight squeeze. "You are most welcome, my darlings," she grinned. Chapter 7, Travel by Train. Shopping for clothes was fun, but for Leezah, Skye and Olingah, the train ride home was even better. On the way back to Auntie Jen's house, Leezah led the way into the train and up the steps. She pushed the seat forward so that the family could all sit together.
"You're a train-travelling professional now, daughter,"
said Flip with admiration as he settled onto the seat.
What words can we make from Chatswood?
Asked Skye-Maree, looking at the sign outside the window.
Chat. Wood. Hat. What?
The train had pulled out of the station and the children had to remember the letters in their head.
Cat. Swat.
Shod, said Rommy.
What does shod mean, Auntie Rommy?
Asked Anissa. It means to fit with a shoe. You could say a horse was shod if it had a shoe put on, for example.
Do,
said Olingah, wanting the game to continue. Dots, said Leezah.
Hood. Stood.
The train ride home was over too quickly, and soon the family was lined up at the sliding doors waiting to get off. The children leapt out of the train and up the stairs of the station. Nick and Anissa were confident of the way home, and after carefully crossing at the lights, the children ran ahead. Rommy and Flip, Jen and Karim were deep in conversation when they turned into the garden and walked up the path to the front of the house. Suddenly, from behind the bushes on either side of the path, 5 monsters leaped out. They roared loudly. Uncle Karim screamed in genuine shock. After recovering from being startled, Flip roared back, running after the monsters as they fled, squealing into the garden. When the monsters had been dealt with, the family made and ate a quick lunch. Then it was time for showers and getting dressed up in the new feast clothes. Even the simplest task, like having a shower and getting dressed, was fun at Auntie Jen's house. The huge bathroom with the mirrors and heated carpeted floor also had a shower with 2 shower heads. So all the girls had a shower together. Attached to the wall were ceramic containers with fancy writing on them. One said shampoo, another said conditioner. A third said body wash. The fourth said foaming face cleanser. At the bottom of each container was a button. When the girls pressed the button, a little dollop of coloured liquid came out. Each liquid smelt like a different flower. By the time they had finished washing their faces, hair and bodies, they smelt like a mixture of jasmine, rose, frangipani and lavender. While the boys had their showers, the girls dried off and dressed in their new clothes. Anissa had some feast clothes too. When they were dressed, they went into Auntie Jen and Uncle Karim's bedroom. Auntie Jen dried their hair with her hairdryer, making it warm, dry, soft and fluffy. Just as she finished, the boys came into the bedroom, clean and dressed and smelling delicious. Auntie Jen dried their hair too, and soon everyone was looking very clean and very smart. Uncle Karim and Auntie Jen gave each child a dab of perfume, and then they were ready to go. Just before they left the house for the train station, Uncle Karim set up a camera on the island in the kitchen. The family stood together, grinning from ear to ear and hugging each other while the camera went beep, 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 flash. When everyone had had a chance to look at the photo, the family headed out of the house and back to the train station. This time, the train journey took more than half an hour. The Fitzgerald children were thrilled. The very best part was when the train went over the Sydney Harbour Bridge. The water sparkled and the afternoon sun shone on the Opera House. There were yachts and ferries crossing the harbour. You know you can climb to the top of the bridge, said Nick to his cousins, who had their noses pressed against the window of the train.
Really?
Asked Skye, pulling her head back from the window and leaving a greasy mark.
That would be so much fun.
It is, said Nick, nodding.
My junior youth group climbed it this year,
he added quietly.
Really?
Said Leezah.
My junior youth group just took care of a smelly wet dog for a week,
she added, giggling.
Service with a smile, don't go being like a crocodile.
Nick was singing a song they all knew and teasing his cousin for complaining about service. Leezah pretended to punch her cousin's arm. 2 stops later was Town Hall. It was a short walk from the station to Darling Harbour. There was a lot to see at Darling Harbour. No one wanted to hurry, but it was nearly time for the award ceremony to start. You will have to come back one holidays and stay with us for a week, said Auntie Jen. The faces of the children lit up. 5 heads nodded vigorously. Auntie Jen led them to a fancy building with very high ceilings and glass walls. The Darling Harbour Art and Cultural Centre. At the front desk, she explained what function they were looking for. The receptionist told them to take the escalators to the 3rd floor and look for the Mish L room. The Mish L room was named after the famous Australian pianist Mish, and there was a photo of her at the entrance of the room. The Sunshine Australia Fruit Company had rented the room for the award ceremony. Inside the room were about 10 large tables. Each one was covered in dark blue cloth and set for dinner. At each table, there were 10 very soft and comfortable chairs. Most of the tables were full. The family was greeted at the door and asked for a name. They were then shown to a table that had been reserved especially for them and had exactly 9 seats around it. In front of the dining tables was a low stage. Along the wall were long tables covered in white tablecloths and laden with food. The family sat down and waited for the program to begin. They didn't have to wait long. But soon after the program started, the children hoped it would soon end. It was very boring. There were speeches about the Sunshine Australia Fruit Company with lots of graphs and long words and numbers. Some television ads for the company were also shown. Finally, at the end, the family who won the cruise was called forward and issued with a certificate. They smiled a lot and had photos with the CEO of the company and were sent back to their seats. Then there was the awarding of the secondary prizes. The Fitzgerald family were called up to the stage and issued with their certificate, promising them a year's supply of pineapple. They also had photos and then were sent back to their seats. But when the speeches were over and everyone had clapped and whistled, it was dinner time. The children were very keen to get up from their seats and have a look at all the different types of food on the long tables. There were prawns and shellfish, curries and stews, many different coloured salads, rice, pasta, soups, crusty bread rolls, and much, much more. But best of all was the dessert table. It was covered in cakes and pastries, ice cream, pavlova, strawberries dipped in chocolate, and doughnuts, just like the ones in the airport. The children hurried back to their parents, who were still sitting on the table and had not yet gone to the buffet.
"Mum!" cried Olingah. "What are we allowed to eat?"
"Tonight, you may all help yourself to whatever you like from the buffet. We strongly suggest you practice the virtues of moderation and self-discipline." The children could not believe their ears. The last words they heard were, Whatever you like from the buffet. The words virtues, moderation, self-discipline floated on the air, but didn't make it to the ears of the children. Unfortunately. Chapter 8. Moderation Goes Missing. The first thing the children wanted to try was strawberries dipped in chocolate. Most of the other guests were helping themselves to dinner, so there was no one at the dessert table. The children gathered around the table. They chose fat, red, juicy strawberries and dipped them, one by one, in a big heated dish of melted chocolate. The chocolate stuck to the strawberry, making a smooth, sweet, creamy covering which then set. When each of them had a bowl of fruit, they took their treats back to the table and sat up to eat them. The adults were at the buffet choosing some seafood and salads. The children bit and licked the chocolate off the strawberries and then ate the strawberries. Olingah found that after the sweetness of the chocolate, the fruit didn't taste very sweet. After he had licked the chocolate off the strawberries and then licked the chocolate off his fingers, he left a few strawberries on his plate. The next food to try was the doughnuts. There were rows and rows of them, just like behind the glass at the airport. They decided to choose 2 each. But Olingah couldn't decide between the donut with vanilla custard, the donut with caramel icing, and the donut covered in pink icing and hundreds and thousands. So he chose all 3. They were delicious and very sweet. The children washed them down with some water. Back at the dessert table, Skye-Maree called everyone over to a soft-serve ice cream dispenser. By pulling a handle, soft-serve ice cream curved into their bowls. There were lots of containers nearby full of chocolate flakes, lolly pieces, and crushed nuts to sprinkle on top of the ice cream with little plastic spoons. Next to the ice cream dispenser was another lever that, when pulled, dispensed caramel or chocolate topping.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
Said Olingah, jumping up and down as he watched his sisters and cousins dispensing the ice cream and choosing their toppings. When it was his turn, he wanted to try a bit of everything. Soon his bowl was nearly overflowing with chocolate ice cream, strawberry ice cream, vanilla ice cream, 10 different types of lollies and chocolates on top, and caramel sauce. When the children took their sundaes up to the table, their parents were just finishing their main course. Rommy looked at her children's faces, covered in chocolate and coloured icing. Then she looked at the bowls full of ice cream. She raised her eyebrows, turned to Uncle Karim, and continued her conversation. Halfway through her bowl of ice cream, Leezah realised she was completely full. She stopped eating. She could not eat one more spoonful of dessert. Everyone felt much the same, but Olingah and Skye could not bear to waste this very unusual opportunity. They kept eating their ice cream until the spoon clinked on the bottom of the bowl. When the ice cream was eaten, there was really no room for anything else in their tummies.
I just want to look,
said Olingah.
Just to see what else there is.
Me too, said Skye, holding her tummy with her hands. The children all went back to the dessert table. They had not yet tried the custard tarts or pavlova or various types of cake. Look, Skye, said Leezah. It's Mississippi mud cake, like Auntie Ray makes for the 19-day feast. Yum, said Skye.
I just want a little bitty piece of it.
She grinned, putting some of the rich chocolate cake on her plate.
Oh, look!
Olingah had spotted pink meringues shaped like pigs. He couldn't resist trying one. There was also cheesecake and caramel slice and fudge. Olingah couldn't resist trying just one of each of those two. Once again, the children returned to the table. Nick, Anissa and Leezah drank some water, while Skye-Maree and Olingah finished off their treats. Finally, even Olingah and Skye could not eat one more thing. Their faces and clothes were smeared with chocolate and coloured sugar. Leezah even had ice cream on the end of one of her plats. The adults sipped some hot drinks while the children discussed how very full their tummies were. Soon after that, the guests started to leave. The Fitzgeralds and their cousins were feeling ready to leave as well. The walk back to the train station seemed a lot longer than the walk from the train station. Skye and Olingah's tummies were so full, it felt hard to breathe. By the time they got to the station, it wasn't only that their skin felt stretched and their lungs felt cramped. Their tummies were starting to gurgle and grumble, squelch and slosh. The cake and chocolate, doughnuts and ice cream were starting to say that they didn't want to stay in these tummies much longer. By the time the train arrived at Gordon Station, Olingah and Skye's brown complexions were looking very pale, even a shade of green. It was very difficult for them to walk along the platform and up the stairs. Rommy and Flip helped them up and along the street to the house. When they arrived at Auntie Jen's house, she asked them to wait outside while she got some ice cream containers. She was just in time. Doughnuts, ice cream, chocolate-covered strawberries, Mississippi mud cake, and lollies came rushing out of Skye-Maree's mouth. A multicolored fountain of steaming, half-digested food poured into the ice cream container. Seeing Skye throw up was the last straw for Olingah, who was already feeling very unwell. A few seconds later, he was kneeling on the cement path and spouting coloured soup into a second container. Flip and Rommy rubbed the backs of Skye and Olingah as tears rolled down the faces of the children. Each time they vomited, it felt hard to breathe. Auntie Jen and Uncle Karim took the other children into the house. "Is anyone else feeling unwell?" she asked. The children shook their heads. Their tummies were very full, but they didn't feel sick. "Good," said Auntie Jen with a smile. "Please go and get changed out of your feast clothes. You could even put your pajamas on." It was already dark, and they were not planning to go out again. When Olingah and Skye felt a little better, they came inside. They rinsed their mouths with water in the bathroom and brushed their teeth. Rommy and Flip helped them change out of their feast clothes. As soon as they were in their pajamas, they climbed into their beds. It was only 7 o'clock. Auntie Jen put clean containers next to their beds in case they felt sick again. Now that all the rubbish was out of their bodies, Olingah and Skye didn't feel like vomiting anymore. They just felt very tired and their throats felt sore. Olingah curled up like a wombat, buried under the covers, and fell fast asleep. In the girls' room, Skye-Maree tried to read one of her cousin's books before sleep, but after a few minutes, she was also fast asleep. Chapter 9, Rommy at Risk? Downstairs in the living room, Nick set up the Trivial Pursuit board. The family formed 3 teams: Rommy and Anissa, Nick and Auntie Jen, Leezah and Uncle Karim. Flip said he would be the referee in case things got heated and fights broke out.
"Dad, we don't need a referee in Trivial Pursuit,"
said Leezah.
"How about you join our team?"
But Flip decided he would be the wild card. He would help all the teams answer the questions. Nick rolled the dice and moved the green counter.
It's a pity Ollie and Skye miss out on our last night together, lamented Auntie Jen.
Yes, said Anissa. True, said Rommy. But maybe something was learned about the value of moderation tonight. That is a good thing to learn. Leezah read a question for Anissa's team to answer.
Who won the 1971 Australian Grand Prix? What's a Grand Prix?
Asked Anissa. It's a car race, replied Auntie Jen.
Did they have cars in 1971?
Asked Anissa.
I didn't think they had cars in the olden days.
The family continued to play for a while, but the game was constantly interrupted by stories and jokes. None of the teams won many coloured chips. Soon Anissa started to yawn. The game was particularly difficult for her as she didn't know the answers to many questions at all. Just before she went up to bed, she rolled a 3 and landed on the green chip square. Nick asked the question,
Do mosquitoes have teeth?
Anissa had been bitten by mosquitoes many times. She immediately said, yes. But before Nick could say whether or not her answer was correct, Flip cried,
Wait, think about it, my little tree of life.
Tree of Life was Flip's nickname for Anissa, because that was what her name meant.
Do you really think mosquitoes bite you with teeth, or do they sting you?
Anissa and Rommy thought about it and decided Flip was right.
No,
said Anissa to Nick.
Mosquitoes don't have teeth.
Finally, Anissa was going to get a question right.
Wrong, said Nick. Mosquitoes have teeth.
Oh no, cried Flip.
Uncle Flip!
Anissa chased after Flip with a cushion. The chase ended with Anissa being tickled while Auntie Jen packed the game away. Nick, Leezah and Anissa hugged and kissed their parents, aunties and uncles goodnight and went upstairs to brush their teeth, read and sleep. Tomorrow, the Fitzgeralds would return to Fellowship Farm and school and a year's supply of free pineapple. It was still dark the next morning when the families woke. The Fitzgeralds were used to waking early, but it was very hard for their cousins. When everyone had dressed, packed, eaten breakfast and had morning prayers, they headed out to the cars. The sun was just rising. Soon they were racing down the freeway. Once again, Auntie Jen and Uncle Karim drove over the harbour bridge, especially for their guests. The sun was rising over the harbour and the water sparkled as if the sun was shining on millions of mirrors. Too quickly the drive over the harbour was over, and they continued through the city to the airport. Auntie Jen and Uncle Karim parked the cars and came into the airport with the Fitzgerald family. They did not want to waste 1 minute of the time they could have together. Sydney Airport was huge. Olingah, Leezah and Skye felt they could explore that airport all day and still not see it all. There were machines at which to check in. There were machines that weighed and took their baggage. And then there was a large section for security. When Rommy had put her handbag on the conveyor belt, they each walked through the arch one by one. When Rommy walked through the arch, it beeped and a red cross appeared. Olingah startled. Rommy went back and took off her watch, belt and shoes. She put them on the conveyor belt. She walked through the security arch again. Olingah held his breath. What if Rommy wasn't allowed on the plane? This time the green light showed. The rest of the family sat on some nearby chairs and waited while Rommy put her watch, belt and shoes back on. When she had finished, they stood up. But before Rommy could join them, a woman in a blue uniform stopped her.
Olingah's heart missed a beat.
"Open your bag for me, please, ma'am," said the woman in the blue uniform. "And stand with your arms out." As Rommy stood there, the woman used a kind of stick to poke in Rommy's bag and touch her arms, legs, and back. Olingah wondered what was happening. He thought Rommy was in trouble.
What if they take her away? He thought. What if they think she's dangerous?
The woman slipped something into a machine and waited a moment. Then she nodded at Rommy and said, "Thank you." Rommy picked up her handbag and came over to her family. Olingah let himself breathe again. He hurried toward his mother and wrapped his arms around her. Tears sprung to his eyes.
What were they doing, Mummy?
He asked, his voice shaking. Rommy could see Olingah was distressed. She knelt down so she was at the same height as him. "Darling, nothing. They check lots of passengers. It's just routine, to keep us safer. Look." Rommy was pointing at a passenger who was taking off his belt and another passenger who had been stopped by the woman in the blue uniform. "It doesn't mean anything bad." She gave her son a big hug. The family walked down a short flight of stairs and past a big display of lollies and chocolates. The children didn't even want to look at it. They continued past shops selling meals and then down a long, wide hallway with windows. This ended at a gate lounge. The screen hanging from the ceiling at the gate lounge had the words GA 960, Launceston 915. There were 45 minutes until boarding. The children played on the travelator nearby, being careful not to cause inconvenience for any other passengers. They pressed their faces against the large windows and watched the planes arriving and leaving, and the workers directing the planes and loading the luggage. A few minutes before the boarding call, Rommy called the children to the gate lounge. The family gathered for hugs and kisses, tears and farewells, promises to write, and plans to see each other again soon. Then came the call to board. The final kisses were blown and hands waved as the Fitzgerald family disappeared into the carpeted tunnel and headed for the plane, back to Fellowship Farm.